Welcome to the North American Waterfowl Podcast. I'm Brett Amundsen. This podcast is dedicated to the ducks and geese that we all love. To kick off this new show, we've got a series of podcasts about the craziest band stories we've ever heard. If you got a great story, let us know about it. Maybe it'll end up on this podcast. I recorded these interviews in 2021, and we've been a little busy with other projects, but we're happy to finally get them out to you. I hope you enjoy them. This show features a name that anyone who's shot a band in Minnesota will probably recognize, Bruce Davis. Now, we've talked to Bruce a few different times about this research and even featured a Prairie Sportsman segment about what he does, including putting GPS backpacks on mallards. And this guy right here, me, shot one. Here's what Bruce has learned from this research. This is the North American Waterfowl Show. Brought to you by DRC Calls, duck, goose, and crane calls made by the North American goose calling champion Corey Loeffler. Learn more at drccalls.com. And Mid-Migration Outfitters, guided duck and goose hunts in western Minnesota. Learn more at midmigrationoutfitters.com. And Fish Hunt Forever. I hunt and always will. Last year, I heard about a study. Well, I heard about the study because I ended up taking part in the study as I found out about a mallard tracking study here in Minnesota being done by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, specifically Bruce Davis, and he joins us now here on the radio show. Bruce, how's it going?
It's going well.
As somebody that spends a lot of time researching waterfowl, this has got to be about your favorite time of year, isn't it?
It is. It's a fun time of year for sure.
Now, did you always like waterfowl? Did you want to be a waterfowl research scientist, or did you just kind of fall into it?
I've been a hunter for my whole life, and when I got into college, as I progressed through college, my focus became more waterfowl based, and it's just built itself from there. Just keep adding on more research work, and now I'm pretty much all I do is waterfowl work. So
it's funny. I love to bow hunt. I love to pheasant hunt. I really enjoy it, but there's just something about waterfowl, and it consumes all of my time in the fall. It's like I don't even have time to bow hunt or pheasant hunt because I'm too busy scouting or chasing ducks and geese around or taking a nap in between chasing ducks and geese around. So I get it. There's something about ducks that I really enjoy. And, you hear about guys that waterfowl hunt a lot, and they shoot a bird that's got a band on it, and everybody freaks out. It's a trophy bird for them. And then you hear about some of the bigger trophies in the waterfowling world, whether it's a tarsal band, or a neck collar, or even a backpack, like a radio transmitter or GPS tracker. And last year, I was lucky enough to shoot a mallard with a tracking unit on it, and I was like, holy smokes, what the heck is this thing? And found out that you were the guy behind it. This is such a neat study, and it's happening again here in Minnesota. I want you to tell our listeners about it. First of all, tell us about, this is a study about mallards?
Correct. Yep, we're studying mallards. We're putting radio tracking units or GPS units on mallards, and we're able to get some information that way about where these birds are located, how they move, and what kind of habitats they use.
Now, this is technically year number 3, but really last year was the first year that you really got some quantifiable data. Is that right?
That's correct. So, yeah, we made one attempt at this study a couple of years ago, didn't do very well, went back to the drawing board. Last year we were able to get a fair amount of data, and then this year we marked birds again in the weeks leading up to the hunting season here this year.
And this is the stuff that really excites me about waterfowl hunting, is learning about their habits and their migration patterns and their feeding habits, and just where they go, where they spend the night, where they feed at, what type of cover, what type of food, what time are they going, how far do they travel. I mean, yeah, I love putting a band on my lanyard, don't get me wrong, but I enjoy hearing the research side of it more. And obviously, when you get banding data, you can find out a few things. But boy, you can really get some precise data by doing it with these radio transmitters, right?
Right. So we use the banding data. It's more coarse. We know where the birds are marked, and we know where they die, and we can calculate some things about their survival rates and understand their harvest rates better just using the banding data. That data is all great. But it doesn't tell you a whole lot about what the birds do in between the when they're marked and when they're harvested. So the data we get out of these tracking units gives us information on these birds, their habits, what type of habitats they're in, what type of habitats they're using at night versus during the day. It gives us some information about the timing of their actual immigration. So when these birds fly off on their fall migration, when they head south, it gives us it fills in a lot of the blanks that we can't get from banding data alone.
Bruce Davis is our guest here on Sporting Journal Radio. He's a research scientist with the Minnesota DNR, talking about waterfowl and a new Mallard study, a relatively new Mallard study. This is realistically year number 2 in this study. And tell people about what you do. You look for 120 mallards, right?
Right. So, this year we marked 90 birds. Last year we marked 120 birds. This year we're using a slightly different radio package. So we're actually marking fewer birds, but we're getting more data out of those packages. So we marked 90 birds this summer. We scatter those transmitters out throughout the state as much as possible. We have banding crews working all over the state of Minnesota, and so I travel to wherever those banding crews are working, and we mark some mallards with these tracking units to complement our banded sample.
And last year you did the 120, you did 40 adult hens and then 80 juvenile drakes, and that was
right.
And it was 2 different types of transmitters. Did you do something similar this year?
Right. So, this year we used. So last year those tracking units, we used 2 different types of transmitters. The one type was a GPS log only unit that the hunter actually had to kill. We had to get the tracking unit back and get the data off to the unit that way. And the other type of unit would log location data and then transmit that data to the satellite. And so this year we're using just one type of unit. We're using the GPS units that transmit data up to the satellites. So we discovered after last year we're actually getting it's more cost effective to use those GPS Argos units and have units that transmit their data. It's a little more upfront cost on the units, but we end up getting more data out of them that way.
So you weren't getting enough transmitters sent back to you then, basically?
Well, we were getting transmitters back, but the cost-benefit ratio, it turns out slightly better in the favor of the units that transmit to satellites.
Okay, sure.
We Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I was just going to ask for kind of a recap then of what type of info just before we talk more about this year's study. Let's talk more about last year's. What did you learn from having these tracking units on mallards from last year?
Okay, we ended up with some very specific information about the timing of immigration from the state, so the timing of the birds leaving the state. Last year, the birds that we marked in far northern Minnesota left at a very similar time to the birds that we marked in far southern Minnesota. It's not really something that we would normally expect, but last year we had, if you remember, last year fall lasted for a long time. It was a late freeze up in northern Minnesota. It was one of the few years where you were actually able to hunt open water in northern Minnesota all the way up until the end of the season. Normally it doesn't happen for us. Normally it freezes up here in northern Minnesota. So we expected there to be more difference in the timing of migration, but there wasn't, because all that freeze up happened so late last year that it just changed the chronology when those birds leave. And so it gave us some information on that. We have some information about how far these birds actually move when they make their migration flight. So what we found in last year's data was that the birds tended to make very large migrations when they moved. The average migration flight was over 400 kilometers.
That's insane to me. When the ducks finally decided they wanted to leave Minnesota, they didn't just go, we'll go a couple hours south. They went 400 kilometers.
Correct. So when the birds finally decided to move, they made large scale movements, which is probably not something that we would normally expect from mallards. It's not really what I expected the data to look like, but that's what it looks like. So we don't know if that was because of the late onset of winter that we had, or if that was a normal thing. We're hoping that this year we'll have some different weather conditions. I don't wish for us to have an early winter. I'm not wishing that on anybody, but I guess I would like to see it more normal.
Sure.
And see so we can have some comparisons in the data on what they do in a more normal year rather than a late onset of winter like we had last year.
Of course. Bruce Davis is our guest. He's a research scientist with the Minnesota DNR, talking about a study about tracking mallards and their habits. They're when they migrate out of the state, how far they go. But also, you learned a lot about just feeding patterns. Tell us more about what you learned about that.
Right. So we were able to, all the location data that we have is GPS quality location data. So we learned some things about how the birds used marsh and crop habitats. In southern Minnesota, we saw large use of crop habitats at night. Something that has been seen in other species of birds in their wintering grounds. We didn't know to what extent that occurred in Minnesota.
Now, when you say at night, are you meaning like overnight or just in the evening, or what do you mean by at night?
Yeah, overnight. So the locations are set at random times, both during the day and at night. So, just our night location cohort is just any bird, after sunset and before sunrise the next morning. And so these birds are using crop fields, or we're using crop fields for feeding at a much higher rate at night than they were during the day.
All right. Bruce Davis, our guest here, Sporting Journal Radio. We'll have more with Bruce coming up as we learn more about this mallard tracking study here in Minnesota. All right, we'll take a quick break. I'll come back. All right, we're back. Sporting Journal Radio. I'm Brett Amundson, talking about waterfowl in the state of Minnesota. How can we learn more about what our waterfowl are doing out there, specifically mallards? And I'm assuming a lot of this has to do with how our season is structured in Minnesota, with the season splits, with the northern zone, the central zone, and the southern zone, and how mallards may move across those zones. Bruce Davis is the man in charge of this. He's been out there marking birds with GPS tracking units on them. This is essentially year 2 of this study. There's 90 mallards that have these tracking units on them. And Bruce, is this going to kind of help the DNR figure out if these zones are working, or just help them kind of determine how the regulations are set?
Right. Well, one of the things it definitely will tell us is how much movement we have between hunting zones in the state, and see if our hunting pressure is causing birds to move out of one zone as those seasons open and close in different zones. I forgot the rest of your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just asking if if this study eventually is going to kind of help the DNR how their regulations are set.
Yeah, so eventually this data all gets used in the evaluation of our seasons, our timing of our seasons, and how regulations are set. When the structure of opening and closing seasons in different hunting zones occurs, all those sort of things, all those sort of decisions that are made down the road, we're hoping to better inform those decisions. So give our guys in charge of setting those policies a little more data to work with.
I've talked to a few guys that are kind of sort of influential in that area, and there's been some talk about extending the season in Minnesota or going later, whether it's a long, 70-day or a longer split or whatever. I don't think we'll see longer splits, but a 70-day season. Would you be in favor of that? And would any data from this study help determine whether or not that would make sense for us?
I'm not sure. I think our 60-day season is something that's set by the Flyway, so it's not likely that the state of Minnesota will go act on its own and have a longer season.
Sure.
But what we may do is it may rearrange the timing of the season in some zones. If for instance we knew that birds were staying later in the southern zone or central zone, or the northern zone for that matter, there's a possibility that the seasons could be altered to better target birds that are in the state, to change things to the hunter's advantage as far as timing of migration goes.
Sure. So when this study came about, was this your brainchild? Did you come up with this idea, and whose idea was it, and why? What justification was given for it? What did you hope to find out?
Yep. So this study was I guess my idea, or you can blame me for this study. I started working this job as the banding coordinator. And that was the real reason that I started down this road towards this study. I wanted to be able to fill in some of the gaps that banding data leaves us. I knew some of the started looking at the banding data, could see some of the patterns in bird movement and bird harvest rates and all that sort of thing there, but of course, when you start looking at data, you just get more questions, and I realized the only way to answer those questions was going to be to have to track some of these birds' individual movements.
One thing I thought was interesting with that duck that I had shot last year, on opening day, it had flown 5 or 6 miles away. It was on public water, and after opening weekend, it had flown to another, I think it was a state wildlife management area about 5-6 miles away. It stayed there for a couple of days, and eventually it flew back. It never really left the area for too long, but it was kind of interesting to see that it did leave, I'm assuming due to hunting pressure, that opening weekend.
Right, probably. We definitely see some increased movement of birds during the early part of the season, especially on opening weekend, when there's a lot of disturbance going on. There's a lot of extra people out there. There's just a lot more activity in the marsh. Probably an area that the bird has been using for a while and hasn't seen a person for quite some time, all of a sudden has multiple boats in it. So,
sure.
The birds react to that. And that's kind of the pattern I saw with these marked birds through most of the year last year, is that, they get disturbed, they move around until they find a place where they don't get disturbed anymore. And then they spend a long time there. That's kind of the way ducks act during the hunting season. And that's been my experience in other parts of the country with other marked birds as well. Birds will move around, as long as they're being pressured, as long as they've got people around, and then they'll finally find a place where it's just harder for people to get to them. or just has the better habitat that they like, and they'll camp out there for as long as they can.
Sure. That makes sense too. So say somebody shoots one this year, they find one of these GPS tracking units on it. What next?
Okay. So they will find my phone number on that tracking unit. And we'd like them to call, us and let us know that they've, harvested that bird. We would like to get those tracking units back from people. So as an incentive, we give away $50 gift cards in return for one of the tracking units. I can get that tracking unit back. I can get the data off of it, and I can actually reuse that. I can put new harness material on it and reuse that tracking unit again next year. So there's a big advantage to the department for getting those tracking units back.
And if somebody, say, wants to mount a bird with a tracking unit on it, you can actually send them a replica, right?
That's right. I have some replicas on hand. If somebody shoots a bird with a tracking unit on it, and wants a replica unit to use on taxidermy or whatever else, just to have as a keepsake, we can send them a replica unit. It looks just like the unit that they have on the bird that they've harvested, only it doesn't have the actual electronics inside the unit.
Which is a great idea. And I hear you actually make those replicas. Is that right? Did I hear that?
Yeah. I found out last year that I was going to be making those in the shop here myself. So, So we do what we need to do to get the data we get.
Well, it's great. I just find this stuff fascinating, Bruce. I could talk to you about it all day long, but I better let you go. But I appreciate the time here today, and I appreciate you just giving all the info. And it's a neat study. Good luck with everything. I hope everybody sends their transmitters back into you. I know if I end up with another one this year, my friends will probably string me up somewhere. So as much as I'd like to shoot another one, maybe we'll give them a chance, or give it a couple years before I shoot another one. But I was glad to be part of the study, and good luck with everything. And thanks for being on Sporting Journal Radio.
Okay. Thanks, Brett, and good luck hunting this year.
All right, if you like this podcast, make sure you leave us a review, like it, share it, subscribe to it, send it to your friends. We appreciate it. And find out more about us at NorthAmericanWaterfowl.com. This has been a Fish Hunt Forever production.